In this video, we're going to apply what we learned about universal design to our coding, and we're going to use some tools that are available online to help us check our pages. I'm returning to our web page 07, which was the last one we did, and that's the one that includes some CSS styling to give us some colors and some nice sections, if you recall. And that also has the most content on the page. So I thought this would be a good one to take a look at. If you recall, that's the page that looks like this. It's got our heading and our different sections. And we put a bunch of junk in at the bottom. So I just uploaded it to a server. And now I'm going to show you how we can start using some tools in order to evaluate this page and then adjust the coding to address any issues. So first of all, I'm just going to grab the URL of the location where the page is on the server. And then we're going to run this through 3 different tools. This is the HTML conformance checker, and I've noted I have links to these 3 tools in this video and in the section for the module. And in all 3 of them, you just enter the HTML page into a little box that's provided. So what this one is looking for is obsolete code. So this is making sure that our HTML is conforming to best practices. So let's go ahead and check it out. Okay, so we have a bunch of different issues here. I did introduce some errors into the page compared to what we actually ended up with the coding, just so that you could see how that looks when we go through some of these checkers. So some of these errors you'll see I actually added in the issue. So for example here, right? Now this would be if we didn't use our language property in our HTML. That would turn up as an error. We need to do that. This one I'll have to tell you about. We need a meta tag to address this issue. And then remember, we've talked about starting your HTML page with a tag like this to declare the type of document. So these are all issues that would be in the head of the page, and I'll show you how to deal with each one of these. And then some of these other errors are things that have to do with the HTML structure in the body. So for example, here it's talking about the type attribute of the UL element being obsolete and to use CSS instead. Okay, we can definitely do that. And then the rest of these are not errors, but they're warnings, and it's telling us to consider using the H1 element as a top level heading only, because there are some screen readers that identify it that way. So in other words, what it's saying is only have one H1 on your page. We can definitely address that because we can start using H2s and H3s. And that may require us to adjust some of our other CSS coding, but that's not a big deal. All right, let's take these in turn. Let's go ahead and address the first warning. Back at our code page here, this one's pretty easy. Remember, we just want that lang property equal to English, or English US in our case. The next issue is telling us about the character encoding. Now this isn't something that we've talked about explicitly before, but in our HTML, you really should have a meta tag that explains what type of character encoding you're using. A meta tag is just a type of tag that goes in the header and can be used to provide additional information. And we will talk about those in the next class in more detail as we get into the intermediate coding. But for our purposes right now, this can be a good introduction to meta tags, and we'll just include the meta tag that explains the character encoding. This code goes right in the head. It just is this meta. And we're going to use the property char set equals UTF-8. And this is just a standard type of encoding. And meta tags, like a few of the other tags that we've seen, like the break tag, this is a single element tag. It doesn't have a beginning and an end. It's just itself. So meta char set equals UTF-8, and there are other types of encoding like ASCII and some other types, but UTF-8 is pretty standard, and that's what we're coding in when we're just using the notepad like this. The next error here, and again, this is an error, not a warning, we have not announced the doc type, and it's even giving us the code that we need for that, and that's really easy to fix. And again, this goes right in the very first line to announce what type of encoding this is using. And then we have a few other ones here. So the type attribute on UL is obsolete, use CSS instead. Let's just address that one right now. let's go down to where we have our ordered lists at the bottom here. This one, because we're just using normal Arabic numerals, we really could take that out and it would be just fine, but we could also use CSS to change that to a different type. And then this one, we have changed that from the default, and so we probably want to make sure that we keep that changed so that we maintain the look of the page that we had coded in here. But we're not going to do it in that way. Instead, we're going to go up into our CSS. Remember, that's in our style section. And we're going to add in a little bit of new code, UL, and then we're going to put a space and then LI so that we know that we're applying this to the list items that are in unordered lists. And then we're going to use list style type. We had square. And that's going to have the same exact effect in terms of the look of the page as what we were doing with that property in our HTML, except we're doing that using our CSS. And then the last few are warnings that have to do all with the same thing. It's telling us that H1, consider that as a top level heading only, and then having different headings on the rest of the page. So let me just show you what that's talking about. And this really has to do with the structure of our page. So we have this H1 here in our header, which is just fine. Now, we really could change these to H2s and then change the H2s to H3s. And then we only have the one H1 on the page. And then we have the rest as the correct type of subheading, you know, and we're still maintaining that structure, that hierarchical structure that we have established here. This one's going to become an H2. That's fine. Now, notice, because we changed those H2s, H1s to H2s and H2s to H3s, right? We might want to come back up here and make sure to change anything as appropriate for our CSS code. So, for example, we want to change that to an H3. And what we initially had was our H1s were all the same, so we could do this and change our H1 and H2. So notice when I put a comma and I enter another tag, it's going to apply this same CSS formatting to both of those tags. So that's going to make our H1s and our H2s the same color now. So again, the changes I'm making, it's just to maintain the look that we already had on the page, just to show you that we can do that. So I'm going to go ahead and save that. And then I'm going to re-upload this onto the server. So I'm going to go ahead and reload my page. Now notice, because we changed those to H3s, it did change the size of this a little bit, but everything else looks the same, just like we had it before, but it's coded differently. Now, when we go back to our HTML validator and we check the page, we have no errors and no warnings to show. That's exactly what we want. Okay, so that's step one. We validated our HTML. We're using the up-to-date version of the code. We have all the elements in there that we need, and we've got a good structure. Now, let's do a further check here using the WebAIM accessibility checker. So again, you just grab your URL, and we're going to go down to the bottom of the page here, check our accessibility. Okay, and we don't have any errors, which is great. But we do have those are coding errors. We have some good structure in the page, but we do have some contrast errors. So let's go ahead and view the details here, and it will show us exactly what the issues are. And I think I can guess, and you probably can too, where the contrast errors are here. It tells us what we've done well as what we need to fix. So in the structural elements, it's telling us, you know, good job. You've got a structural element in your data table. You've got a table caption, you've got your headers, and those are all good things. So we've done a good job coding our table and including the elements that would be needed for a screen reader. It's also telling us we've done a good job including structural elements like our headings, 1, 2, and 3, ordered and unordered lists, and that in the page itself, we have a header and a footer. So all of those things it's telling us we're doing well, and that's great. But the issue here is the contrast, and that's where we find some errors. And you can actually click on them and it'll show them. And no surprise, the one color of blue on another color of blue is coming up as not great contrast. And, you know, I have to agree. Let's go back to our code and see if we can fix this. Notice if you want to find the exact problem, you can go to the error and then you can click on the code view and that'll show you the exact element that is an issue. And so in this case, it's our H3. So when we go back to our code page, we want to make sure we're doing the H3 and enter a new color value. And I'm just going with a kind of dark orange color because I figure orange is a complementary color to blue. I made it a little bit of a darker hue, and then hopefully that's going to give us enough contrast against that light blue background. And if we go reload our page, you'll see here's the color that I'm going with here. And let's try it in the wave tool. Now we have no contrast errors. So the page looks good. We have no errors, alerts, or contrast errors that we need to worry about. And we have a really strong page structure that would be easy for someone using a screen reader to follow. The last thing I'm going to show you is the Toptal colorblind web page filter, which I demonstrated in another instructional video. This is, as I mentioned, is another good one for checking your page, and it gives you a visual sense of what someone who is colorblind in each of these different ways would actually see when they're looking at your page. If you take a look here, you know, not bad, looks pretty good. Everything, and again, when I say looks good, I'm not talking necessarily about style, I'm talking about readability, usability. And so changing the contrast of that H3, that really helped in terms of evaluating this. And then finally, remember I mentioned to you the grayscale, that can really help with your contrast. So it's okay. We might consider making this an even higher contrast between this background and the title, but overall it looks pretty good. With each of these tools, you can evaluate your page, and I showed you how you can make some changes to your code based on the things that you find.